The scent of cedar still lingered, even after 60 years. I opened the chest slowly, like someone revealing a well-guarded secret. My fingers, mottled with age spots and calloused from a lifetime of work, traced the faded fabric lining the interior. I carefully picked up the stack of yellowed papers. The rustle of the old parchment broke the silence of the house. Have you ever stopped to wonder what a lifetime of work is worth in the eyes of your own children? How long it takes for gratitude to curdle into impatience, and then into thinly veiled contempt. My name is Linda Peterson. I'm 83 years old, born in 1942, right here in rural Georgia, and I know exactly what I built from nothing. Ever since Arthur passed, taken by that sudden heart attack, it was me who transformed a simple feed and seed store into the largest agricultural supply distributor in 3 counties. Now, with my white bun and my worn hands, I'm just the old lady who doesn't understand digital marketing. But they forgot one thing. Whoever holds the original documents holds the power. And that's why I opened this chest today. The Georgia sun has always been merciless. Even in the cooler months, when the rest of the country cools down, here the heat hugs you tight without asking permission. In our house in Willow Creek, the windows stayed open all day, hoping to catch any lost breeze. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 1985 when Arthur passed, a Sunday like any other. We were having Sunday dinner after church, talking about expanding the feed and seed store, when he just stopped talking. His eyes lost focus. His hand dropped the fork that clinked on the china plate. And that was it. No time to call for help. Mike was 20, David 18, and Kevin only 15. 3 boys to raise alone in a time when a woman running a business was still quite a thing. The funeral was barely over when the comments started. Poor Mrs. Peterson. She'll have to sell the store. A woman alone can't handle a business like that. The boys are too young. They'll run it into the ground. Even the bank manager called me in for a chat. Sitting behind that varnished desk, he looked at me as if I were a lost child. Mrs. Peterson, you should really consider selling the establishment. I can even recommend interested buyers. After all, a widow with 3 children to raise. I walked out of that bank with my spine straighter than when I walked in. The next morning I was at the store at 7 a.m., my hair still dark back then, pulled back in a simple ponytail. I put on the Peterson Seeds logo shirt that Arthur had made, and that I'd never worn before. Sam, I called out to our only employee at the time. Show me where Arthur kept the accounting ledgers. The man frowned, confused. But, Mrs. Peterson, are you going to mess with those? I am. And from today on, I want to learn everything about this business. The first few months were a bigger challenge than the severe drought of '58, which I still remembered from my girlhood. I'd wake up at 5, prepare strong coffee and grits for the boys, get dinner started and head to the store. I'd come back to serve lunch, check Kevin's homework, and return to the store until closing. At night, after everyone was asleep, I'd study the accounting books by the light of the lamp, the ceiling fan creaking above me, the old transistor radio playing country music softly. Money was tight. We had to sell the family car and keep only the old pickup truck, a faded blue Ford F-150 that Arthur used for larger deliveries. I learned to drive that behemoth in a week. The gears ground, the steering wheel was heavy for my small hands, but I had no choice. Mike, my eldest, wanted to drop out of agricultural college to help me. No, son. Your daddy wanted all 3 of you to get your degrees. We'll make it work. And we did. with a lot of sweat, some nights crying hidden in the bathroom so no one would hear, and a determination I didn't even know I had within me. I soon realized that many local farmers were buying seeds and supplies from the big cities because no one offered variety around here. It was an opportunity. I started traveling to Atlanta bi-weekly, making contacts with suppliers. The first time I walked into those offices full of men alone, it was intimidating. They barely disguised their disdain. "Are you sure you can afford these volumes, Mrs. Peterson? Who's going to drive the delivery truck? You?" I smiled and replied calmly, "If I have to, I will." Before long, the store's business grew. I hired 2 more employees. The smell of fresh seeds mixed with strong coffee became the hallmark of Peterson's Seeds. Farmers began to trust me when they saw that I knew how to distinguish quality seeds, that I understood planting cycles, that I could guide them on best practices. Meanwhile, my sons grew up. Mike, serious and responsible like his father, graduated from agricultural college and came back to work with me. David, more restless and ambitious, studied business administration in Atlanta. Kevin, the youngest, always the smartest, chose law. Our simple house in the center of Willow Creek remained the same. The faded yellow walls, the hydraulic tile floor I cleaned every Saturday with red wax, the solid wood furniture I inherited from my mother, Eleanor. The black and white television was replaced by a color one when the boys insisted, in 1990. The landline phone was installed in 1988, a novelty that cost a small fortune, but it made business easier. The smell of home cooking remained unchanged. Even on the busiest days, I made sure to serve creamed green beans, slow-cooked pot roast with roasted root vegetables, a hearty rice and beans casserole, or even a big pot of chili on weekends. It was around the dinner table, under the yellowish light of the simple chandelier, that we maintained our unity. As the years passed, the small store transformed. In 1994, with economic stability, we had enough security to expand. We bought the adjacent land and expanded the space. We changed the name to Peterson & Sons Agricultural Supply. We added fertilizers, tools, small equipment. When Mike suggested we buy a computer in 1998, I was hesitant. "That's too modern, son. We've always done everything on paper." "Mom, the future is in computerization. We'll be able to control inventory better, make faster quotes." I accepted, even without fully understanding that noisy machine with a heavy monitor that took up a corner of the office. I learned the basics, enough not to be entirely dependent on others. By the turn of the century, we were already a reference in the area. We opened branches in neighboring towns. David returned from Atlanta to manage the finances. Kevin, after graduating, organized all the legal aspects of the company. Little by little, I delegated responsibilities, preparing them to take over. At the year-end parties when we gathered the employees for the celebration, I looked proudly at what we had built. From the small seed store Arthur left, we now had almost 50 employees, a fleet of trucks, and clients across the southeast. My daughters-in-law arrived one by one. First Jennifer, Mike's wife, always elegant and a little distant. Then Amanda, who married David, simpler and more affectionate. Finally Stephanie, Kevin's wife, cultured and discreet. The grandchildren came, filling the house with noise on Sunday family dinner days. I remained president, but little by little I withdrew from the day-to-day operations. At 70, I still went to the office 3 times a week. At 75, I reduced it to 2. But I never stopped following the numbers, knowing the oldest clients, maintaining the relationships I built with so much effort. That's why the meeting that Thursday caught me by surprise. Peterson and Son's central office had changed a lot since the days of the small store. We now occupied a 2-story building on Willow Creek's main avenue. The modern facade with mirrored glass contrasted with the interior, where I insisted on keeping traditional elements, like Arthur's desk and some restored old chairs. The meeting room overlooked Sentinel Peak, a rock formation that was a symbol of our town. It was there that we met monthly to discuss the company's direction. I arrived a little early, as always. Dolores, an employee who had been with us for over 30 years, had already prepared coffee in the blue agate pot I brought from home. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson. It's hot. Just the way you like it." "Thank you, Dolores. Have you seen my sons?" "They're arriving. They were in Mr. Mike's office, talking quietly." That caught my attention. Low-pitched conversations usually meant things they didn't want me to know. I ignored the small prick of suspicion. They were my sons, after all. Soon they entered. Mike, at 60, gray-haired and upright, led the group. David, at 58, shorter and a little overweight, always in an impeccable suit. Kevin, 55, modern framed glasses and a serious expression. Behind them, their wives. This was unusual. Board meetings were normally only for the directors. "Good morning, my boys," I smiled, adjusting my patterned dress and the pearl necklace Arthur gave me for our 15th wedding anniversary. I noticed that no one returned the smile sincerely. Jennifer, Mike's wife, sat a little apart, but she had that glint in her eye I recognized from other occasions, the look of someone waiting for something to happen. Mike cleared his throat, adjusting the papers in front of him. "Mom, we called this extraordinary meeting to discuss the company's restructuring." "Restructuring? I don't recall us discussing this before." David intervened, adjusting the expensive tie I knew had been bought in New York. "It's precisely about that, Mom. The company needs to modernize to face the competition. We're losing market to distributors who invest in technology, e-commerce, digital marketing." I looked around the table. Their faces were tense, except for Jennifer's, who could barely hide her anticipation. "And why do we need an extraordinary meeting for this? We could discuss it at the regular monthly meeting." Mike slammed his hand on the solid oak table that belonged to his father. The sound echoed through the room, making Dolores, who was serving more coffee, jump. "Mom, with all due respect, but you need to understand that times have changed." That tone. I knew it well. It was the same one he used as a teenager, trying to convince me to let him go to parties far from home. David completed, adjusting his tie. "We're losing business because you insist on outdated methods. Nobody makes verbal contracts based on trust anymore." I smelled the freshly poured coffee. It seemed more bitter without me even tasting it. I looked at Kevin, always the most sensitive of the three. He avoided my gaze before speaking. "It would be better for you to take on a consultative role, you know? Decisions need to be more agile." Consultative, a pretty word for sidelined. I then realized what was happening. It wasn't a restructuring. It was a coup. A coup staged by my own sons, the ones I raised alone, who I fed with the sweat of my labor. "Are you taking me out of command of the company I built?" I asked, my fingers drumming on the table as I did when the three of them were up to mischief as children. "It's not that, Mom," David said. "We're professionalizing the management." "Professionalizing?" I retorted. "And who do you think professionalized all this while you were still in diapers?" Mike sighed, impatient. His eyes so much like Arthur's, now stared at me with a coldness I'd never seen directed at me. "Your opinion isn't worth anything, Mom. Not in today's market. You barely know how to use WhatsApp. How are you going to understand digital marketing?" The silence in the room was cut only by the hum of the air conditioning. Those words, coming from my firstborn, cut deeper than any steak knife. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, which had so many times counted seeds to sell at retail when we didn't have money to hire help, trembled slightly on the table. Dolores let out a small gasp of surprise. Jennifer adjusted herself in her chair, a small smile at the corner of her lips. I looked at each of them. Mike, whom I taught to walk. David, whom I held all night when he had a fever. Kevin, whom I taught to read at home before he went to school. My sons, my boys, now men who thought I was worth nothing. I slowly rose, adjusted my patent dress, and simply said, "If that's what you want, that's what it will be." I left the meeting room with the dignity I learned from my mother, Eleanor, who sold cornbread at the farmer's market to send me to school. In the hallway, Dolores looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She knew. She had heard everything. "Mrs. Peterson." "It's all right, Dolores. They've forgotten where they came from, but I haven't." My voice came out firmer than I expected. Inside me, a storm was brewing, but on the outside, I maintained the composure I always had in difficult moments. I returned home, the same house where I raised the three of them, and which I keep exactly as it was when Arthur was alive. The wooden floorboards creaked under my tired steps. I passed through the kitchen, where the smell of coffee still lingered in the air. The wall clock, a wedding gift from my mother-in-law, ticked steadily, marking 3 in the afternoon. I sat in the rocking chair on the porch and watched the ripe cherry plums on the tree in the backyard. The heat of Georgia seemed milder compared to the fire I felt inside. A mixture of hurt, disappointment, and surprisingly, a rage I hadn't felt in decades. That's when I remembered the chest, the cedar wood chest my father left me before he died. "Keep what's most precious here, my daughter," he had said. All these years I'd kept the truly important things there. Not jewelry or money, but papers, documents, memories, proof. I got up with new energy and went to the bedroom. I knelt down with difficulty, my knees weren't what they used to be, and pulled the chest from under the bed. The small old key was kept inside the music box Arthur gave me on our first wedding anniversary. I opened the chest, and the smell of cedar brought back memories of other times. There they were, organized in folders, the original documents of the company's founding. Contracts, deeds, trademark registrations, all in my name and Arthur's. After his death, I transferred some to the boys, but I maintained control of the main properties and the brand. They thought everything was in the office safe, but those were just copies. The originals, with notarized signatures, were here. They always had been. It wasn't paranoia, it was precaution. Something I learned when a friend's brother-in-law tried to take over her store after her husband's death. "Always keep the original documents in a safe place," old Mr. Jenkins at the county clerk's office told me. "Paper is power, Mrs. Peterson." And now, that power would be my protection. The next morning, the landline phone rang. The shrill ring echoed through the silent house. It was David. "Mom, we're looking for the original company documents for the restructuring process." "What documents, son?" I asked with the innocence I had learned to feign over decades of negotiating with distrustful farmers. "The founding contracts, the property deeds, the trademark registrations. They should be in the office safe." "Oh, those documents," I replied slowly. "They're not in the safe, son." There was a silence on the other end. I could almost see his forehead furrowing with worry. "What do you mean they're not in the safe? Where are they then?" "They're safe. They always have been." "Mom, we need those documents urgently. The investors are waiting." "Investors?" I asked. "What investors are those?" Silence again. So that was it. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were selling the company, selling my life's work, the legacy I built for them. My mother's heart ached deeply. The betrayal was greater than I imagined. It wasn't just about seeing me as outdated or useless. It was about completely erasing my existence, my effort, my history. I took a deep breath, smelling the coffee I'd just brewed. Outside, the church bells tolled, announcing noon. The same bells that rang the day we buried Arthur. The same bells that woke me every morning for another day of struggle. "David, tell your brothers I want a meeting. Tomorrow, at my house. Not at the office. And all 3 of you, without your wives." He tried to argue, but for the first time in years, I used the tone that left no room for discussion. The tone I used when they tried to pull a fast one on me as teenagers. After hanging up, I looked out the kitchen window. The backyard with the fruit trees I planted when we moved here. The mango tree under which the boys played. The cherry plum tree that Mike and David almost cut down trying to build a tree house. So many memories. So much love given. For what? But what happened the following week completely changed the game, in ways my ungrateful sons couldn't even imagine. That night, I barely slept. The old double bed, where I had so often shared dreams with Arthur, seemed too big for my tired body. I tossed and turned, while the ceiling fan spun tirelessly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mike's face telling me my opinion was worthless. At 5 a.m, I got up as I had my entire life. Some habits don't change, even when the world is falling apart. I brewed strong coffee in the old percolator, its aroma filling the kitchen with memories. I sat at the wooden table, the same one where the boys did their homework, where I planned the company's expansion, where I cried in secret when difficulties seemed greater than my strength. I spent the entire morning preparing everything for the meeting. I took out the lace tablecloth my mother had woven as a wedding gift. I polished the dining room table with carnauba wax until I could see my reflection in it. I baked cornbread, made cheese biscuits, and fresh fruit tarts. I cut fruit from the backyard. I made fresh squeezed lemonade, Kevin's favorite drink since he was a boy. For lunch, I carefully planned slow-cooked pot roast, creamy mashed potatoes, and our special green bean casserole with some fluffy buttermilk biscuits. The food that raised them, that nourished them through nights of studying, that comforted them in hardships. I wanted to remind them who they were, where they came from, what I gave them before they had air-conditioned offices and meetings about digital marketing. Around 11, Dolores appeared at the back door, unannounced. In her wrinkled hands, she carried a yellow folder. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm sorry to come without warning." "Dolores, you never need to warn me. This house has always been yours, too." She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She sat in the kitchen chair, placing the folder on the table. "I brought something you need to see." She opened the folder carefully. Inside there were printed copies of emails, spreadsheets, documents with the company's letterhead. Last night, after you left, they continued the meeting. They asked me not to come in, but they left the door ajar. When I served coffee, I saw these papers on the table. Later, I came back and made copies. I looked at the documents, feeling my heart clench. They were proposals to sell the company to a large group from out of state. The value was there, underlined in red. $50 million. In Mike's notes, plans for each of them after the sale. Ranch in Montana, condo in Miami, luxury car dealership. "They've been planning this for months, Mrs. Peterson," Dolores said, her voice low as if she was afraid of being overheard. "I heard Mr. Mike talking to Mrs. Jennifer, saying it was just a matter of convincing you to step aside quietly." I remained silent, absorbing the blow. It wasn't just about sidelining an elderly mother who didn't understand technology. It was about selling what we built, erasing our history, turning 4 decades of work into money for ranches, condos, and luxury cars. "There's one more thing," Dolores continued, taking a small recorder from her pocket. "After everyone left, I stayed to tidy up the meeting room. They came back, thinking they were alone." She pressed the button. Mike's voice sounded clear. "Tomorrow we'll make that offer for Mom to retire. We'll offer her a monthly pension, she accepts, and signs over the powers. No drama." David's voice. "And if she doesn't accept?" Mike again. "She will. The old lady's tired, she just needs a push. If she makes too much drama, we'll remind her she's getting senile, forgets things. We can even suggest a medical evaluation if needed." Kevin's voice hesitant. "Don't you guys think we're being..." "Being what?" Mike interrupted. "Realistic? Mom had her time. Now it's ours. Or would you rather stay in this provincial company while opportunities pass us by?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Dolores turned off the recorder, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson. I know I shouldn't meddle, but after 30 years working with you..." I touched her wrinkled hand kindly. "You did right, Dolores. Now I know exactly what I'm facing." After she left, I put the documents in the chest along with the originals. I went to the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, and took out a large envelope where I kept my will. I read it again, thoughtfully. Then I picked up a pen and paper, sat at the desk, and began to write a letter. The words flowed like the waters of the reservoir after the first rains. When I finished, I sealed the envelope and put it in my dress pocket. I was ready to receive my sons. They arrived promptly at noon. First Mike, driving his imported SUV. Then David, in the German sedan he bought last year. Finally, Kevin, more discreet in his luxury domestic car. They parked side by side on the cobblestone street in front of the simple house where they grew up. I watched them from the living room window. Mike seemed impatient, checking his watch. David adjusted his tie, as he always did when he was nervous. Kevin looked at the house with an expression difficult to decipher. They entered together, like when they were boys coming home from school. I opened the door before they could ring the doorbell. "My sons." I smiled as if nothing had happened. "Come in. Lunch is almost ready." They exchanged glances, confused by my apparent tranquility. They expected tears, recriminations, drama from a wounded old woman, not a composed matriarch, dressed in her best patterned dress, pearl necklace around her neck, and white hair perfectly styled in a bun. "Mom," Mike began, "we came to talk about serious matters." "And we will talk," I replied calmly. "After lunch. First we eat, as we always have in this house." I led them to the dining room, where the table was meticulously set. The china plates I only used on special occasions. The silver cutlery from my wedding trousseau. Crystal glasses Arthur gave me on our 10th anniversary. I served them as if they were children. The steaming pot roast, the golden mashed potatoes, the fluffy rice, the green bean casserole. The smell of home cooking filled the room, bringing back memories that I saw reflected in their faces. "Remember when your daddy used to bring the best pot roast from the next county over?" I asked as I served David. He always said it was the best in Georgia. An awkward silence. Then Kevin, always the most sensitive, replied, "I remember, Mom. He'd come back with a truck full of meat and fresh cheese." "And you boys would run to help unload," I continued. "Not for the work, but to make sure each of you got a piece of fresh cheese curd to eat while it was still warm." A small smile appeared on David's face. Mike remained serious, but I noticed his eyes wandering around the room, at the old furniture, at the photographs on the walls. The house where he learned to walk, to talk, to dream. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The clinking of cutlery on plates was the only sound, until Mike, impatient as always, put down his fork. "Mom, we need to talk about the documents and your future in the company." "Of course, son," I replied calmly, pouring more lemonade for Kevin. "But first, I want to show you something." I stood up and went to the bookshelf in the living room. I returned with 3 old photo albums, bound in leather worn by time. I placed them on the table, between the plates. "Open them," I simply said. They looked at the albums with suspicion, as if they might contain a trap. It was Kevin who first reached out and opened the one in front of him. The first pages showed the small feed and seed store, still with the Peterson's Seeds sign painted by hand. Arthur smiling at the door, in a straw hat and plaid shirt. I next to him, young, dark hair tied in a ponytail. Simple dress. "This was the first store," I explained. "Your daddy started by selling corn and bean seeds to small farmers." I turned the page. Now a photo from 1985, right after Arthur's death. I was behind the counter, deep, dark circles under my eyes, but with an upright posture. Mike as a teenager beside me, serious like his father. "This was taken a week after the funeral," I continued. "Old Mr. Henderson from the general store offered to buy the store that day. He said a widow with 3 children couldn't keep the business going." David flipped through the second album, which showed the company's expansion in the 90s. The first branch, the purchase of the trucks, the inauguration party for the warehouse. "Remember when we bought the first computer?" I asked. "You spent a month teaching me how to use it. I was afraid to press the wrong button and lose everything." Mike finally picked up the third album. In this one, more recent photos. The company already large, the inauguration of the current headquarters, the 3 of them graduated and taking on executive positions. "Why are you showing us this, Mom?" Mike asked, his voice less harsh than in the previous day's meeting. "To remind you of where we came from," I replied simply, "of what we built together." I stood up again and went to the sideboard. I returned with the cedar chest, which I placed on the table, moving the plates aside. "Do you know what this is?" "Grandpa's chest," Kevin replied. "You always kept important things in there." "Exactly," I smiled, taking the small key from my dress pocket. "The really important things." I opened the chest slowly. The smell of cedar mingled with the aroma of the food. I took out the folders organized by date. I opened the first, showing the original documents of the company's founding. "When your father died, I transferred the company into my name. Alone, without expensive lawyers, without consultants. I went to the county clerk's office with you 3 small boys, explained the situation to old Mr. Jenkins, the clerk, and he helped me with the paperwork. I opened another folder. When we bought the land for the first branch, in 1994, the seller tried to cheat me. He wanted to charge double the market value, thinking I didn't understand business. I researched alone, found out what it was really worth, and negotiated until I got a fair price. Another folder. In 2001, when the competing distributor wanted to buy us, they offered a pittance. I refused. They tried to boycott us with suppliers. I took the old F-150, drove all the way to Atlanta, walked into the biggest supplier's office, and didn't leave until I ensured we would continue receiving merchandise. Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair. David looked at his empty plate. Kevin, the only one who met my gaze, had watery eyes. Do you think I don't know what professional management is? Do you think I built all this on improvisation? That I got here by chance? Silence. The wall clock ticked steadily. I know you want to sell the company, I finally said. The three of them looked up, surprised. How? Mike began. How do I know? I have eyes and ears, son. And I have Dolores, who's more loyal to me than my own sons. I opened the last folder, showing the copies of the sale documents Dolores had given me. 50 million, I said, looking at the number underlined in red. That's what you think my life's work is worth. Mike tried to explain, his face red with anger or shame. I couldn't tell. Mom, it's a business opportunity. The company is worth a lot and we can all benefit. Benefit? I retorted, my voice firm but without raising my tone. With ranches in Montana and luxury car dealerships? Is that the legacy you want from what we built? David intervened, trying to smooth things over. Mom, you'd have financial security for the rest of your life. A generous pension, your house. My house, I repeated slowly. How generous to let me stay in the house I built with your father, that I paid for with my labor. Thank you very much for the charity. Kevin, who had been silent until then, spoke softly. Mom, I didn't agree with the sale. I wanted you to know that. Mike shot him a furious look. It doesn't matter who agreed, I continued. What matters is that none of you can sell anything without me. I took the most important documents from the chest. The updated articles of incorporation, the deeds, the registrations. I still hold 52% of the company's shares. The contracts for the main properties are in my name. The Peterson and Sons brand belongs to me. Without my signature, you can't sell so much as a screw from the company. Mike exploded, slamming his hand on the table as he had done in the meeting. You can't do that. We've been planning this for months. Planning behind my back, I calmly corrected. Planning how to sideline the senile old mother, as you said yesterday in the meeting room when you thought no one was listening. He paled. David swallowed hard. Kevin lowered his head. Dolores, I continued. Always so discreet, always so loyal. She recorded everything. I took the small recorder from my pocket and placed it on the table, among the documents. I won't play it again. I've heard enough to know what my sons think of me. A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, the church bells tolled, announcing 2 in the afternoon. The same bells that rang at each of their baptisms. What do you want, Mom? David finally asked, pragmatic as always. Respect, I replied simply. I'm not asking to return to full command. I'm too old for that. But I want to remain on the board, with a voice and a vote. I want the company to stay in the family. And I want you to remember that opinions don't have an age limit. The silence was long. It was Kevin who first reached out his hand across the table. You're right, Mom. We were ungrateful. His eyes, so much like Arthur's, were sincere. I took his hand in mine, feeling the soft skin of someone who never had to work the fields as I did. Mike and David took longer, but eventually agreed. Not out of love, I sadly realized, but out of necessity. The reality of the documents, the compromising recording, the legal impossibility of carrying out their plans without me. Still, it was a start. We have one more thing to discuss, I said, picking up the envelope I'd prepared that morning. My will. I handed each of them a copy of the letter I had written. It's not a legal document yet, but it will be. I'm dividing my portion of the company into 4 equal parts. 4? Mike questioned, confused. Yes, 1 for each of you, and the 4th for the Arthur Peterson Foundation, which will be established after my death. What foundation? David asked. An educational foundation for young farmers in the region, to teach agricultural technology, small business management, and environmental conservation. We will build the headquarters on the land next to the central office. I explained the details, how the foundation would have an independent board, how a portion of the company's profits would be directed to scholarships, how each of them would have to dedicate a few hours a month to lectures and mentoring. This is non-negotiable, I concluded. It's my legacy, what I want to leave beyond money and property. They read the letter in silence. Each word I wrote during the night, thinking not only of them, but of my grandchildren, of the young people in the region, of Willow Creek's future. I didn't ask for an immediate answer. I knew they would need time to absorb it. I stood up, gathered the documents, and returned them to the chest. Now, who wants dessert? I made bread pudding just like your daddy used to love. A week later, I returned to the board. Not as a figurehead, but as the matriarch who built everything from scratch. The meeting room now had a new plaque on the door. Linda Peterson Boardroom. A small gesture from Kevin, who took on the task of reconciliation. Mike and David were still distant, but respectful. Jennifer didn't hide her frustration when we met. The other daughters-in-law seemed relieved by the outcome. At the first meeting after the confrontation, I presented my proposal for the company's modernization. Yes, me. The old lady who didn't understand technology. We need a digital presence, yes, I agreed. But without losing what brought us here. Personal relationships with clients, deep knowledge of the local market, quality service. To their surprise, I presented a detailed plan I had prepared with the help of Dolores and her 22-year-old granddaughter, a digital marketing student. A strategy that combined the best of tradition with technological innovation. You underestimated the old lady, I smiled, seeing their surprised expressions. I may not know how to use WhatsApp properly, but I know when I need help and where to find it. In the following months, we implemented the changes. The company gained a modern website, social media profiles, an online ordering system. But we maintained personalized service, farm visits, the knowledge accumulated over decades. The results were not long in coming. Sales increased by 30% in the first quarter. New clients came through the internet, but stayed because of the trust we instilled. The group from out of state that wanted to buy us came back with a new, even higher offer. We refused together this time. It's not for sale, Mike said on the phone, surprising me with his firmness. Peterson and Sons is a family legacy. The documents. They remained in the cedar chest. Some guarantees have no expiration date, But I made notarized copies and distributed them among trusted lawyers, with clear instructions on when and how to use them, if necessary. On my 84th birthday, we gathered the whole family for a backyard lunch. Under the cherry plum tree I planted with Arthur, 3 generations of Petersons celebrated together. My older grandchildren, already in college, listened attentively as I told stories of the store's early days. "Grandma," asked Lucas, Mike's son, now an agricultural student like his father, "is it true you drove an F-150 loaded with seeds all over these roads?" "Absolutely true," I replied, seeing Mike smile at the memory. "And without power steering, son, strong arms and courage, that's what I had." After lunch, while the younger ones played football on the adjacent land, Mike approached, sitting in the rocking chair beside me on the porch. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant, "I wanted to apologize, truly, for what I said in that meeting." I looked at him, my firstborn, now with graying hair like Arthur's. "It's all right, son. It's past." "No, it hasn't," he insisted. "I said your opinion was worthless. It was unforgivable." I took his hand in mine, feeling the marks of time, the lines of the life we shared. "You know why I was able to build all this, Mike? Because I learned to forgive. Your grandfather, my father, was a tough man. He thought women didn't need to be educated. I forgave. The banks that denied me loans when I became a widow, I forgave. The clients who doubted I understood agriculture because I was a woman, I forgave." He looked at me attentively, like when he was a child waiting for a story before bed. "Holding a grudge is like carrying a bag of rocks on your back. It only hurts you. I forgave you the moment you said those words. I just needed you to understand what you did." Mike had tears in his eyes, something rare for such a controlled man. "The company would be nothing without you, Mom. I'll never forget that again." "It's not about the company, son. It's about respect, about valuing those who paved the way for you. Not just me, but all the elders who built what we have today." At the end of the afternoon, when everyone had left, I remained alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky of Willow Creek orange. Sentinel Peak, an imposing silhouette against the horizon, seemed to watch me with approval. I thought of Arthur, how proud he would be of what we built. I thought of my mother, Eleanor, who sold cornbread at the market to send me to school. I thought of my sons, who, despite their mistakes, were the continuation of my story. I took the small key to the chest from my pocket. Glistening under the golden light of dusk, it represented not just the documents it held, but a lifetime of struggles, achievements, and lessons learned. Some people think that as we get older, we lose value, that our opinions become obsolete, that we should make way without questioning. But age doesn't diminish the value of experience. It multiplies it. Every wrinkle on my face is a lesson learned. Every white hair on my head, a battle won. In that moment, under the orange sky of the rural South, I understood that my greatest legacy was not the company, nor the material possessions I accumulated. It was the example of determination and dignity I left for my children, grandchildren, and everyone who crossed my path. The next day, arriving at the office for the weekly meeting, I found something new on my desk. A brand new smartphone with a handwritten note from Mike. "For your opinions that are worth gold, we've installed WhatsApp, Instagram, and even TikTok. Dolores' granddaughter will teach you how to use it. The market needs to hear the voice of experience." I smiled, picking up the device with my wrinkled hands. Maybe it was time to learn new tricks. After all, Linda Peterson was never afraid of challenges. The matriarch's documents continued to be stored in the cedar chest, protected by the scent of the wood and the love that built an empire. Not out of distrust, but out of precaution. Because whoever lived what I lived knows that life is unpredictable, and that the most enduring power is not in money or property, but in the wisdom of those who weathered storms and are still standing to tell the story. In the end, I discovered that the true document that matters is not written on paper, but in the memory and heart of people, the record of a life lived with purpose, courage, and dignity that no one can take from me.